All you Trekkers and Trekkies, isn't it wonderful to have the first first vaxxed, fully vaxxed convention? We will live long and prosper. And it feels just wonderful to be getting back, easing into what's supposed to be normal. Let's hope that we can get as many people vaxxed as possible. To me, it's just bizarre that people fight getting vaccinated. Isn't it crazy? I mean, fight about something worthwhile. They're fighting for their death. I mean, simply spoken. So I love you all who have the good sense to get vaccinated so that we can have gatherings like this where we can enjoy each other, and the fact that Star Trek is now 55 years old. Just a few days ago, I was at Skirball Museum in Los Angeles, where we had the 55th birthday of Star Trek, together with all of our many, many progenies, what we call our spin-off shows. There are children, and the thing is, we are still going strong because the fans, you guys, are still going strong. And you guys reproduce like triples. And so we've been reproducing our children, our progenies, with these new spin-off TV series, as well as feature films. And we all owe that to not only the original fans, but the original fans were the ones that really gave us this longevity, to whom we're very, very grateful. But then they reproduce with new babies, and their babies are now adults. We keep on growing and growing, so thank you all very much. And we all owe all of this to one single visionary, Gene Roddenberry. Because it's his vision, his ideals, his philosophy, infinite diversity and infinite combinations that he visualized on the Starship Enterprise in the 23rd century. And it's his ideas that attracted all of you, generation after generation. And on August 19th, he would have been 100 years old had he lived. So we celebrated his centennial in Los Angeles as well. So a lot of important benchmark days. The 55th birthday of Star Trek, the 100th anniversary of Gene Roddenberry, had he lived that long. And of course, we don't need to be reminded that today's the 11th day of September. And we need to all pay tribute to those that perished then, and to the frontline workers, the rescuers that passed on that day 20 years ago from today, as well as those that passed after that because of the poison they breathed in or got in their bodies somehow. This is a very special day, and we have heroes like that, people that gave of themselves. I think of the plane that crashed into Shanksville, not in one of the major landmarks of our country, but in a green countryside. They were the passengers on that ship that rose up and got control of the terrorists and made the plane crash there. They are amazing heroes who we also need to remember today. And also all of the people that perished in those planes that crashed into the World Trade Center and to the Pentagon. So it reminds us of many important dates that we've observed in recent times. And that is what gives us both inspiration and the will, because we are strong. We are not only Americans, but people throughout this world who believe in justice and progress and ideals, and not in the terrorism that infect, unfortunately, too many people in this world. And we have them in this country too, who fight and argue and threaten for death, which is going unvaccinated. So mindful of the dark side, as well as the golden shining people that make us be inspired to move on. And so with that, let's begin our discussion. Our time is very limited, they tell me, but have they set us up with mics? Where? Oh, there's one mic I see. Do we have any other mics? Well, do line up here, and we'll get our conversation going.
How are you doing, George? My name is Angela. I'm from Corvallis, Oregon, which is about a good 2.5-hour drive south from here. And I just wanted to say, my dad took me to the theaters when I was 6 years old. That is 36 years ago, to this weekend, to see Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. And that was my introduction to Star Trek, period. And I just gotta say, you were actually the best dressed in that whole entire crew. I loved your jacket. It was very, very poppin'. It was very stylish. I mean, especially back in the 80s.
I swashbuckled in that leather cape, didn't I?
Oh, yes. And I also followed your career from Star Trek to Clone Wars to Heroes. And I just want to say one ultimate thing. Domo arigato, Takei-san. Domo.
Domo arigato to you as well.
That's it.
As I said earlier, I appreciate the support that all of you have given us over all these many, many years. Some of the people that came by my table saw me in pre-Star Trek guest shots. Would you believe I was that young? I was on My Three Sons and The Twilight Zone and Perry Mason, and they brought those pictures to me, and I looked like a baby. There was a time when I was that young. Yes. I'm going to make myself comfy here.
I'm Alex, or Captain Kirk from Iowa. So first I wanted to say, and I'll try and get through this as quickly as I can and get to your...
What are you holding in your hands? Sheets of paper.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for letting me talk about my Chinese grandmother, Maylene, at your panel before asking my question at Emerald City Comic-Con 2019 in Seattle, and taking the paper I gave you from her service of life that I went to before your panel. And she passed away from cancer, even though she lived a really healthy lifestyle. But she was someone who, I'm glad she cared about the Earth's health as well, because she would spend multiple times a week picking up trash off the beach, and she donated family land that I think she owned to be a nature preserve, so the nature there, can thrive and be how it should be.
She was generous. She contributed her land for the good of the community.
True. And having seen, since I went to my first Comic-Con in 2013, actors from your show and Next Generation and someone from Deep Space Nine and Voyager, you do hands down one of the top panels for Star Trek fans, because I loved hearing and found it really educational, interesting, and informative hearing you talk about the internment camps and things like the importance of democracy, that one which you shared at the panel in Seattle at one time when your dad talked about President Roosevelt, who was president way back then. So I just wanted to share that and wrote these notes so I could get through that as quickly as I can without taking up too much time.
Well, we have people lined up behind you, so if you could bring your statement to a close.
I will.
So that we can share the mic with others.
My question is, setting aside all your wonderful Star Trek movie and TV and animation, do you have a favorite movie, TV, stage, or voice acting performance from your career?
My favorite from my career.
Setting aside Sulu, Hikaru Sulu.
Right,
even though it's
other
great
than
and we
Hikaru
all
Sulu.
love that.
I have a few. It's hard to say which one over the other, because I love each one of them, each in their own way. But I love the opportunity I had early on in my career with Playhouse 90 that I did, and that led to another important role that I enjoyed doing. That was on Twilight Zone in the episode called The Encounter, a two-character drama with Neville Brand. That gave me a wonderful acting opportunity. And also, I did it on the stage in New York as well as on television in Theater in America series. It was, I think, the first time that I was able to use my Asian experience, Asian American experience in the character that I did. It was a play titled The Year of the Dragon by a Chinese American writer, Frank Chin, who was a powerful writer. And it was of this a young Chinese American man in San Francisco who has father-son relationships with his father, as well as his sense of competition and envy with his siblings. So I would say those were they weren't the most widely viewed shows. The Year of the Dragon on Theater in America, or Playhouse 90, which was an important TV series back in the 50s, a 90-minute live television show written by some of the top-notch young writers, cast with some of the top-notch young actors of the time. So I would say those were the ones that fulfilled me the most.
Thank you. I'll have to check out the Blu-ray I have at home of the original Twilight Zone show and watch that episode.
Great. Thank you very
Good
much.
luck.
Hi. Very quick, thank you for being an activist and being open and out when it wasn't cool. For people who, like me, who have come out, it's nice to have heroes who have come before us and done it so classily. My question is, Star Trek has always been kind of groundbreaking and trying to be inclusive and diverse. And we see these new properties like Lower Decks and Discovery trying to do the same thing. Is there anything that you would like to see as like a population or a way to represent people that you haven't seen so far in science fiction or in Trek?
Well, you know, my experience is more with Gene Roddenberry And as much as I admired him, how he made, well, he told me that the Starship Enterprise was a metaphor for Starship Earth. And he saw that for us to be able to survive all of the challenges of life in the 20th century, and back in the 60s, we had a lot of challenges. We had the civil rights movement going, where African Americans were demonstrating for their equality, who were being attacked by law enforcement officers with attack dogs and fire hoses, that kind of outrage. That was going on. The Vietnam War was going on in Southeast Asia, and that was dividing this country. Those people who were passionately pro-war, and those others who were passionately pro-peace. And I've been involved in all those issues. And yet, there was one issue that was very close to me, very personal to me. I was gay, but I wasn't involved in the gay rights movement, because what I experienced, I wanted to be an actor from the time I was very young. I had a dream that became a burning fire and a passion in me. But as a teenager, I made a discovery. There was an actor that really was my heartthrob. Most of you may not recognize the name Tab Hunter. Some of you do. You're of my generation. He was a contract actor at Warner Brothers, and he was handsome, good-looking, blonde. He took his shirt off in a lot of the movies. He had a fantastic build, and he was a good actor. And I was a fan of his. But suddenly, he disappeared. And I discovered it was because one of the scandal sheets had exposed him as being gay. And I was feeling those same things about him and some of my classmates. Bobby, who was a very pretty boy, thick eyelashes and the sweetest smiles. And there was another kid named Richard, who I think came from a very poor family. And his mother didn't buy him clothes every season. He had very small t-shirts and very worn jeans. And I noticed something when he was playing marbles. When he hunkered down to play, his shirt ran up and his jeans got pulled down. And I saw the cleavage of his rear. Yes, most guys look at the cleavage in front, but I noticed the cleavage in back. And so I knew I was different. But I was used to being different because when I was even younger, 5 years old, soldiers came to our home. My father actually, my brother and I shared the same bedroom. He was 4 years old, I was 5 years old. My father came into our bedroom very early in the morning and dressed us hurriedly and told us to wait in the living room while my parents did some last-minute packing in their bedroom. And my baby sister was an infant, and she was in a cradle with them in their bedroom. So my brother and I were just gazing out the front window when suddenly we noticed two soldiers marching up our driveway. They carried rifles with shiny bayonets on them. They stomped up the front porch and with their fists began pounding on the door. We thought the whole house was trembling. We were terrorized. My father came, answered the door, and literally at gunpoint, our family was ordered out of our home. My father gave my brother and me each box tied in twine to carry. He hefted 2 heavy suitcases, and we followed him out onto the driveway, and we stood there waiting for our mother to come out. And when she finally came out, she had our baby sister in one arm, a huge duffel bag in the other, and tears were streaming down both her cheeks. It was a terrifying morning that began a 4-year reign of terror for us. We were put in barbed wire prison camps, sentry towers, machine guns pointed at us, and we were taken to 3 different camps over that 4-year period. The last one was Tule Lake, and that had a half a dozen tanks patrolling the perimeter. It was a series, unrelenting series of assaults on the dignity of my parents. I was too young to really understand what was going on, but I grew up in that experience, 4 years behind barbed wire fences, because we looked different. We looked like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. We're Japanese Americans, but we're Americans. My mother was born in Sacramento, California. That's America. My father was a San Franciscan, and we were born in Los Angeles, my sister and brother and I. And yet, we had the face of the enemy. And so the government categorized us. 120,000 Japanese Americans on the West Coast were categorized as enemy alien. This nation went crazy. I mean, absolutely insane with racism and war hysteria. And it affected even the great leaders of our nation, the greatest being the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. My father admired him in the 30s during the Depression because he said the country was not just economically depressed. The country was spiritually depressed. People lost their jobs, their homes, their source of income. They were going hungry and lining up in long lines for a bowl of soup. I mean, that's how low the country was. And the president had to galvanize the country and get their spirits up so that we can pull up the economy. And he said to them, "You have nothing to fear but fear itself." That was what, and he started building post offices all over the country, which created jobs. He even hired artists, who were the first ones to lose their job, to paint those great murals that you see in your post offices. He created jobs and brought the nation up. But when Pearl Harbor was bombed, he saw, I mean, that was a surprise attack. We weren't ready for it. And now he became aware of the whole west coast of the United States. Washington, Oregon, California, and parts of Arizona. And he ordered all Japanese Americans on the West Coast because we looked like the enemy. We were all classified as enemy alien, which made no sense at all. That was the only charge, enemy alien. There were no real charges, no trial. The central pillar of our justice system is due process. When you're arrested, you have a right to know why you're being arrested, and then you have the right to challenge it in a court of law, and then they have to provide evidence that you are guilty of what they're accusing you of. They had no evidence of anything, and yet they sent the soldiers out to imprison us. It was a time when the United States lost its ideals, our democracy, equal justice for all. Government ruled by law, due process, all that disappeared. It can happen in the United States. This is a people's democracy, and the people are fallible human beings, and even a president is a fallible human being. And so we all have to be actively engaged in a participatory democracy. And my father taught us that even after all that he went through. I mean, it was the darkest breakdown of our democracy. And yet, when we were released after the war, and that again, we didn't do anything. We were in prison all during that time, subjected to insult after insult. And then, when the war is over, the gates are open and we're free to go. And we were impoverished. They took everything from us. So they gave us $25 to start life anew, when my parents by that time were middle-aged. And so I've known how a whole great nation can be reduced to fear and do this kind of injustice. And that's why I've been involved from the time I was very young as a teenager in political, I was a volunteer at countless political campaigns, and I was an activist on the civil rights movement, the peace movement during the Vietnam War. But the only issue that I was silent on was the issue that's most personal to me. And that was because I passionately wanted an acting career. And Tab Hunter losing his job let me know that I could not be out and gay and also be able to pursue an acting career. So I was closeted most of my adult life. But I saw how these other guys and gals were sacrificing everything, not only their jobs or their careers. Some even lost their families. All this loss, and yet they were there campaigning for my issue. And I felt that issue needed to be worked into Star Trek as well as the civil rights movement and the peace movement and the hippie movement, all that. And so at a party that Gene Roddenberry threw around his party one evening, I thought I'd chat with him about that. But at a party, you really can't have a discussion on that subject. But I noticed that most of the party was at one end of the pool, and Gene swam out, and he was kind of alone at the far end, just looking up at the sky. And so I took my clothes off and I swam out with him, and I started chatting with him. And I said, on this show, what you've accomplished is deal with all of the relevant social issues of our time in metaphor as sci-fi. And those of us who could see beyond the surface plot, we knew what the issues were. And I said, well, you've made us all feel proud to be associated with the show, but there's one issue that we've not dealt with. And have you thought of dealing with the gay issue in America? And he said, yes, that is an issue that I'm keenly aware of, but I'm walking a tightrope with Star Trek. Our ratings are very low, and the lowest rated show was the one where we had a black-white kiss, where white Captain Kirk kissed black Uhura. A lot of the Southern station refused to show that episode, and therefore that was the lowest rated. And he said, I'm a risk taker, but I'm in danger of losing the show on air, and I can't deal with the issues that I am dealing with if I get canceled. I need to be on the air. And if we deal with the gay issue, that will get us canceled. Nevertheless, because of the quality of not only the show, but the fans that we had, it was the fans that campaigned to keep us on for 3 seasons. They wrote intelligent, thought out, diplomatically worded letters to NBC and to Paramount. And so they renewed us for 2 more seasons, 3 seasons altogether. And so he said, I can't deal with that issue back then. And I understood that because I was closeted. And I spent most of my adult life in the closet feeling guilty because these other people that were out there campaigning for my issue were succeeding and making progress. And in 2003, Massachusetts got marriage equality for LGBT people. Hurrah for them. And that came through the courts, the state Supreme Court. Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled for marriage equality. 2 years later, on the other coast, California, our legislature, not through the courts, but the people's representatives, the Assembly and the Senate both passed the marriage equality bill. This was a landmark achievement, and it would have been the bookend to Massachusetts on the Atlantic coast and on the Pacific coast, San Francisco or Sacramento. If it had one more signature, that of the governor. The governor of our state at that time was a movie star. You know who? Not my friend. But when he campaigned for governor, he campaigned like all politicians do. He said, I'm from Hollywood. I've worked with the gays and lesbians. Some of my friends are, insinuating that he was a friend of the LGBT community. And I must say, some of our gay friends did vote for him. I didn't. But he became governor of California. And when the marriage equality bill landed on his desk, he acted like the right-wing Republican that he is. He vetoed it. And we were raging. But Brad and I were at home watching it on TV because we were closeted. And the story of his veto came on, and we saw young people pouring out onto Santa Monica Boulevard, venting their rage on Arnold Schwarzenegger. And we felt the same way, but we were safe at home watching it on TV. And the guilt and the anger and the sense of frustration finally drove me to it. Brad and I discussed it, and he agreed with me. And I spoke to the press for the first time as a gay person, and I blasted Arnold Schwarzenegger's veto. Thank you very much for that. That means so much to me. It was.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And since then, I came out loud and visible and all over the country. I partnered with the Human Rights Campaign in Washington, D.C., and I went on a nationwide speaking tour at universities and other corporate gatherings, speaking out for LGBT equality. And I've been active and out and loud ever since then. And so that issue was one that I tried to lobby Gene Roddenberry on, but as a closeted man at that point, I understood why he couldn't deal with it. So that's the history of my activism with the LGBT community from the very closeted years, which was also a part of the continuation of my imprisonment behind barbed wire fences. I called my closeted years my invisible barbed wire fence. I was imprisoned by, and that was a self-imposed imprisonment. I was not out. I was imprisoned behind invisible barbed wire fences. So that's my story on that issue.
Thank you for sharing. My question's a little more lightweight. Hope that's okay.
Thank you.
So, when you read through your very first Star Trek script, can you tell us some of the impressions, some of the things you remember? Did you have any idea what it might become?
Well, first of all, at that time, I was a young actor hustling for gigs, you know, guest shot here, guest shot there. And when this script came to my home and I was reading it, I was so profoundly taken by the social philosophy, which Gene explained to me during the interview. He said, I'm using metaphor to deal with the issues of the time. And I'm using the Starship Enterprise as a metaphor for Starship Earth. And the strength of this starship lay in its diversity, coming together, working in concert together as a team. And by benefiting from the diversity of perspectives, experiences, the cultural vantage point, all that we're better equipped to deal with whatever challenge we face rather than just one view of it. And so I wanted to be on that show. I loved the philosophy. I loved, immediately fell in love with Gene Roddenberry for his brains, not for his beauty, but for his brains. And I wanted to be doing that show. What impressed me with the first script was the intelligence with which Gene's philosophy was incorporated, and also good storytelling. Mm-hmm. I mean, here were all these people. I mean, it was a Rip Snorton soap opera. I mean, a space opera. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, to have the philosophy that it had and tell an engaging story. So I desperately wanted to be in that show, and I got my wish. It happened. I got cast. But before that, when I was so desperately hoping that I get cast, I get rid of attention by going out on long runs. And so I was running all over my neighborhood and more. And I went to the Hollywood Hills and ran up and down those hills just to get rid of my attention. And once I got the word that I was cast, I started running again because I was so happy. So running is my therapy, and the script that I read and the person that I spoke to, Gene Roddenberry, was what convinced me that this was a show that was going to be the fork in my life. And it was.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I think we all agree that we're grateful for you. Can you tell me about a guest experience on one of the TV shows that you've done that was particularly fun? I'm thinking Big Bang Theory, but I know there's others.
This, of course, Big Bang Theory was post-Star Trek. And that's exemplified by the fact that Gene was generous enough to give me 2 of my costumes, my Captain Sulu costume and my Star Trek 3 and 4 costume. Somebody just made a comment on that costume, the swagger and the swashbuckling dash I had, the leather cape and the kind of a kimono folded shirt. Friend there, and he's talking with her in bed, and she's saying, "Do you have homosexual tendencies?" And he says, "No, but lo and behold, I show up in my swashbuckling Star Trek 3 and 4 costume, leather cape and all." And Howard says, "No, I don't have those tendencies." And my character steps up and says, "Well, here I am." That was a lot of fun.
And this will be the last question of the panel. All right, perfect segue. Who would you go straight for?
A very direct question. Gina Roddenberry. I could have given you a longer answer, but since my time has obviously expired, thank you for asking that. You will live long and prosper. Thank you. Thank you. I love you all. Bless your hearts.
Ladies and gentlemen, make some noise one more time for George Takei.